All right. In this video, we are going to talk about problem 4.144 from our textbook about the HPV vaccine. It says in the article, correlates for completion of 3-dose regimen of HPV vaccine in female members of a managed care organization from the Mayo Clinical Proceedings. C. Chow et al. Examined characteristics that may influence whether young female patients complete a 3-injection sequence of the Gardasil quadrivalent human papillomavirus vaccine HPV-4. HPV is a virus that has been linked to the development of cervical cancer. The following joint probability distribution summarizes completion of treatment versus practice type. Okay, so right off the bat, it says owner. That doesn't make any sense here. So I'm pretty sure that is a typo. Let's just get rid of that. All right, and here it's whether they completed. So I'm just going to say completed. Okay. So here it's whether the young female patients completed a 3-injection sequence. So they have to take 3 injections, right, spaced out over some period of time. So yes, these people completed. No, these people did not complete. Okay. And then over here, it's what kind of practice that they went to, whether they went to a pediatric clinic, a family clinic, or an OBGYN. Okay. Okay. So it says, for a patient in the study selected at random, find the following probabilities and interpret your results in terms of percentages. Okay. So in part A, they want to know what the probability of C1. Wait a second. There we go. It's better. All right. So probability of C1, that is if I randomly select a patient, what's the probability that they completed the 3 injection sequence? Okay, so this is a joint probability distribution. They tell us that, right? So these are probabilities. So we want to know what's the probability of a yes, right? And all we have to do is look down here, and that is 0.332. So what that's saying, right, is that about 33.2% of the patients completed the 3 injection sequence. All right, part B, they want to know what's the probability of T2. So T2 is the event that the patient attended a family clinic. Okay, and so all we would have to do is look over here, right, and look at that probabilities. And so we get 2.258 as the probability. So what that says is that about 25.8% of the patients were treated in a family practice. All right, next up is part C. And in part C, they want to know what's the probability of C1 and T2. All right, so that is not a marginal probability like these two. It is a joint probability. So in this table here, so we would look for C1, right, the column C1, and its intersection with the row T2, and that's right here, right? So it would be right in here, and this would give us the probability, 0.075. All right, and so what that says is that about 7.5% of the patients in this study completed their treatment in a family practice. Okay. All right, part D. In part D, they want to know what's the probability of C1 given T2. All right, so that is a conditional probability, right? And so we would use the conditional probability formula. We want to know what's the probability of T2 and C1 divided by the probability of T2. All right, well, we have already calculated those things, right? The event T2 and C1 is the same as C1 and T2, right? It's what they have in common, so it doesn't matter which one comes first, right? They have in common what they have in common, regardless of how they're listed there. So we've calculated that probability up here in part C. And the probability of T2, right, is 0.258. All right, and then we would just calculate that out. So 0.075 divided by 0.258, and I get 0.291 on that one. Okay. So what it means is that of those patients, right, who went to a family practice, about 29.1% completed the 3 injection sequence. Okay. All right, and that puts us at part E. In part E, we want to know the probability of T2 given C1. All right, so again, that is a conditional probability. We would use the conditional probability formula. That would be the probability of C1 and T2 divided by the probability of C1. Okay, and so we have all those things already calculated out. We know that the probability of C1 and T2 is 0.075. We know that the probability of C1, right, is 0.332. All right, and then we would make that calculation. So 0.075 divided by 0.332, that's going to give us 0.226 to 3 decimal places. Okay, and so what does that number represent? And they want us to explain it in terms of percentages, right? So that's saying that of those people in this study that completed, right, that were in C1, so those are the completers of the 3 injection sequence, about 22.6 were treated at family practices. Okay, so 22.6% of the completers were right in treated at family clinics. Okay. All right, and that is it on this problem.